with some police. Come on, dude. How did you do well not even being able to speak?
Hopefully he'll win. We'll see how he does in the Senate.
Be right back.
That's my jam. I want to crank it in my car. I want the 3-minute version of this.
You don't need the remix. Yeah, we got to give Gary lots of time in overtime because he's going on vacations, as we used to say in Laredo. Hey, do you have vacations? All right. Here we are live from the studio on Facebook and What's Your Point?
An all-male panel.
Yeah.
Well, Holly's coming
Holly
back.
must
Everybody
have-
take a little break. Marcus, has there been a bunch of folks come in?
Sorry.
Bunch of folks come in from out of town, stopping by the restaurant.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, that's good.
Been quite a few. I had a great talk with a gentleman yesterday who came in, and I showed him some Southern hospitality, even though he was rocking a Phillies shirt. And we talked for about a good 5-7 minutes. And really good guy, right? Great conversation. Then I found out that the reason he was here and going to the game was because he's a pitching coach, and he coached two of the dugout guys, two of the backup relief pitchers for the Phillies.
Really?
Coached them since they were teenagers coming into the league, and so they're like his. To see them playing in the World Series. And so I looked at him. I was like, dude, I've been over here talking to you all this time and found out you the freaking enemy. I knew you were the enemy, but I didn't know you were the enemy, right? You were the cause of our loss. So I took his grits. I took his grits back from him.
You did not.
Good job,
did
Marcus.
not.
Good job.
No, I gave him more, and then I gave him some extra gravy to take down to the hotel to feed to the players. Our gravy has a time release on them. At 7:03 on the dot, bam.
Sleepy. They get sleepy.
Hey, Holly, I wanted to circle back around to your article on the crime stats because, basically they've been suggesting that the crime wave is over and that everything's on the slide back down. And then we'll go to Gary Pollan on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I mean, I think there's some evidence to show that crime may be down this year over last year, but it's too soon to tell. So here's something to understand. Well, first of all, the sheriff's office told me they have not reported any stats for the month of September at all. But also they acknowledge that there's some kind of technical problem with their system, and their reporting for sexual offenses is off. So what they saw at their reporting was, for example, in the category of rape in the month of June, there were 74. Then all of a sudden in July, there's 1. And in August, there's 0. And I asked them about that, and they said, yeah, we're having some kind of problem. I don't know if they've notified the state about this problem. I don't know if it affects other categories. I don't know if it's related to the J-Web failures that they have had repeatedly, which they had again earlier this month, where they couldn't process, suspects being brought in. So there's some kind of huge problem going on here. Here's another thing to understand about these numbers that a couple of people in law enforcement explained to me. You cannot compare year-to-date numbers because we don't know what they are for quite some time. So, for example, we could still get data today that shows us homicides or rapes from January, February, March. I mean, this information is often very delayed as they discover things, people report things, rape allegations get processed. It takes a long time for the numbers to show up. In my research, I learned too, this is why you can go to the Texas DPS website and you can pull up a 2020 report that shows homicide numbers for 2017. then you pull up that same report for 2021 that still shows homicide for 2017, but it's a higher number because of more cases have come in for homicides that year. Does that make sense? And it's just a very complicated process. So to get up there and say, oh, year to date, our crime is down, we just don't know. It's not verifiable.
It's just unclassified today that Gary Pollan is going on a peace mission to the Middle East. Of course, it's his peace of mind mission. He's going to relax. That's good. Gary, I mean, you're in the courthouse, 5 days a week. What's your take on this?
There's been no slowdown in crime, and Holly is right about how the serious cases get filed. So if a killing takes place, the police investigate it before they determine it's a murder. Sometimes that takes a couple of days. Sometimes it takes months, especially in sexual assault cases. I've represented some citizens accused of sexual assault. It took 8 months for the case to get filed because of all the investigations and what they're checking out in terms. Some of them turn out to be totally bogus, by the way, but that's how defense lawyers get rid of cases, when the police file stuff that really isn't any good. But no, we still have a crime problem. And look, in terms of the appearance of David Mitchum and Kim Ogg to the commissioner's court, you notice they're not criticizing the Republicans who walked away, because they know the whole idea they're getting more money is an illusion. Like, the real plan, I believe, if the Democrats maintain control of Harris County Commissioner's Court, meaning reelect Lena Hidalgo, reelect the other two, is they're going to cut law enforcement again, because they've got all kinds of social programs they want to fund. I mean, this is the agenda. That's what she's done. Lena's done, and Rodney and Adrian, and so that will continue. However, if the Republicans take control, I anticipate the money will be found for 1,000 new police patrolmen. There'll be money found to pay our jailers a living wage. By the way, that's not talked about, Greg. But in the jail, they can't hire jailers because the job doesn't pay much more than you can make at McDonald's. So you can understand why people don't want to go work in the jail with a bunch of hardened criminals to supervise when they go to McDonald's, and the only danger is getting burned by French fry grease. So that is a huge problem. In addition, of course, we've denigrated the police over the years, and that's caused a problem in recruiting the kind of quality people we would like. It's almost like, be careful what you wish for. So there's people who are thought about being policemen, they're college educated and really bright, and then they see how the profession's denigrated because of the bad apples in the profession, and they say, what do I need to do this for? So that is all a big problem. I'm hopeful we can take care of that. In terms of the hospital district and their whining, they got millions and millions of dollars in reserve. But bureaucrats are always wanting more money. I mean, that's just how the game works. And so what has happened, I think, over the last 4 years is the bureaucracy has been unleashed to go crazy, and they have. And I think that ends up causing the problems with the county budget. But I want to say that Marcus is spot on when he says county government, city government, how we spend money, it needs to be under the microscope all the time, as opposed to hiding in shadows, because there's waste, fraud, and abuse going on everywhere.
All right. Hey, Tony made a point during the broadcast about, and you used the term denigration, Gary, but that Latinos were being portrayed in these ads as victims. April Aguirre, I don't know if you know her. She's nobody's victim. She's getting in people's faces. I thought one of the most effective ads was the father of the son who was killed in the road rage incident. Holly, who was that?
As Paul Castro, right?
Man, Paul Castro saying, like, look, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but this cannot continue. He didn't look like, I mean, he is a victim, but, he was pushing back. He was being proactive. I don't know. Maybe you can enlighten me, Tony.
Sure. By the way, Gary left this kitchen sink out of his monologue. He's like, I'm leaving. I'm going to bring it all.
Are you playing on Elon Musk and his fun pun lesson?
Exactly. You may have seen that the Houston Chronicle editorial board shockingly endorsed Alexandra Miller over the incumbent Judge Lena Hidalgo, and a lot of folks reacted to that. I did send a letter to the editor, which I'm glad the Houston Chronicle published, but one thing I brought up at that time too was that besides the whole argument of the editorial board, which I didn't think was sound. Again, I'm a proponent of free speech. If the Chronicle board chooses to endorse anyone they want, they can do so. But I thought the argument was really faulty. And one of those points was that they didn't talk about Latino issues. And instead, here's what's happening. The parties then will just bring out a Latino out of all of a sudden. And because there's a Latino in the discussion, other Latinos are supposed to say, oh, well, they've covered that issue. I also don't think it's fair. And I think it's exploitive where the one time you bring up a Latino issue is to bring up, they brought up Mr. Castro. And again, my heart goes out to him. I mean, I don't, he's got a lot of tenacity to be out campaigning for what he thinks is right. I'm not, if he's got a powerful voice, that commercial is very effective. However, I do think less of the political powers or any advertising companies that exploit that tenacity and don't give entire Latino views. And here's the other thing that I think the Republicans should work on. Again, they're very smart campaigns, because what I've seen Abbott do is he will react to commercials, so they can change this. In that, I have only seen Latinos who have been victimized or hurt by crime on Alexandra's commercials and in that commercial that we're talking about right there. And to me, that is the problem where we're not being humanized. Takes a lot to explain this. But I think it confuses Latino voters as well, because their hearts are tugged, Greg. So, and I did write more about that in the editorial. It's a complicated issue, Greg, because by the same token, I want more Latinos being talked to during these campaigns.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you make? I'm sorry. What do you make of the recent studies that showed that these Latino families in the country and in the state of Texas care about the same issues as everybody else? I mean, they listed public safety, they listed crime, they listed inflation, border security. I mean, they care about the same issues everybody else cares about. I don't, and I do see positive ads. Myra Flores and Cassie Garcia have some very positive ads. Tony Gonzalez, and and these are Republican Latino candidates who are out there making a lot of headway. I mean, how is that? How are those issues different? I mean, what is it that you think needs to be addressed as a quote unquote Latino issue?
I think one of the main issues is that you've got these national entities. It's the National Republican Party, National Democratic Party, and they want to impose their ideas of what it means to be Latino, and it just doesn't work nationwide. You're going to see it fall apart. When folks come in thinking that they're going to use the model that worked in Florida or California and Texas, it just falls apart. And I think kind of what you're speaking to is the local campaigns. That's really what people get is that definition at that base. There's just not a smart approach across the board, because to me, it's like, well, no kidding, Latinos care about the same thing. But I mean, to your point, I would argue Democrats have abandoned Latino Democrats in Texas. Biden didn't visit to come to Texas, right? So it's like
order.
Yeah,
it's because his numbers are dismal. They don't want Biden here.
I just saw a piece this morning about the overwhelming number of Latinos that are leaving the Democratic Party. It's astounding, and for some reason the Democratic Party is not getting the message. I don't know. Maybe this is the wrong number.
I want to circle back around to that $250 million proposed tax increase that was effectively derailed by the Republicans. For me, the case had to be made to somebody like Marcus, who's running a business, who's seen all of his costs go up. He's seen his labor costs go up. He's seen the cost of running his business go up. He has probably seen the appraisals on his properties go up, and so they are suggesting we need to maximize the amount we can tax you, and you will get some ancillary benefits. Did they effectively make the benefits are from the long-term investments they're making in the social programs? I guess that was the best I heard. Marcus, did they effectively make that argument to you to justify increasing your tax bill?
No, that wasn't the case, and I'll tell you why. Uh, the first why is believability, right? I just don't feel like I believe that the money that's being raised will go in the direction that it's supposed to go in, especially when you consider things like what Holly's mentioned earlier. Expanding the government to a point where it's costing hundreds of millions of dollars more. I just don't see it. Secondly, it's no uh, secret on how I feel. I don't want, same way I didn't want a new tax for one specific thing. I don't want another new tax for another specific thing. If we're gonna give a new tax for one layer in the municipality, whether it's police or whether it's fire, that was for fire. I disagreed with that. Why? Because we're not giving a specific tax for the city, the public works department, right? I think that designation for one particular place disproportionately, I have a problem.
And to
Go ahead. Go ahead, Holly.
To your point, they set up that Harris County Toll Road Authority. All that money was just supposed to go to roads and improvement and all that kind of thing. Well, now they've siphoned those funds off. They go into the funds at the county to spend on anything else that they deem appropriate.
Yeah,
it's marketplace behavior.
They were supposed to be mobility funds, but now they're going to everything else.
But here's the point about that. When you drive around the Houston, Harris County area, do you think our roads are better than they were 4 years ago or worse? My answer is they're terrible. They are absolutely terrible, and we've siphoned the money away. Oh yeah, and we built bike trails, bike lanes everywhere. And unlike Austin, where I am today, where I see people actually using the bike lanes, I don't see that in Houston or Harris County. Nobody's riding those bikes.
I don't know.
I love bike lanes.
I love bike trails.
Good. I like roads that don't have potholes.
I mean,
you're not going to feel safe riding a bike lane if crime is out of control and you feel.
Well, they're not riding downtown.
Go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, I don't know what I was saying.
Hey, Gary.
I was saying it's marketplace behavior, right? There's this thing, right? Once you determine what the market will pay, right, then you go after it. I learned that my first 2-3 years in business. There was a drought. I don't know if y'all remember. There was a drought in Mississippi area. Catfish ponds dried up. My catfish went up sky high, 3 times the amount, right? Then instead of it being when the rain did come back, the price never went back down to where it was. So right, and because they knew that I would buy it so it didn't go back down to $1. They met me in the middle, and it was $2. The same goes with once you tax somebody and you see that they're willing to pay it, and you can use that fund is not going to stop. I don't know how they do the homework. I've never seen a fund stop ever in the history of. Once they start taxing you, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna keep it going.
There are efforts over the past year on the part of some commissioners to eliminate some of the duplicative programs, and they got shut down. So we have duplicative programs for veterans and things like that. It's great to have.
Yes,
arguing against those, but
3 Democratic votes to 2 Republican votes. That's how it went. Now,
earlier, Gary, Kim Ogg gave a press conference after she spoke at Commissioner's Court, standing with the Republican elected constables, and she said, I'm standing here, we're Democrats and Republicans standing together. And she wasn't there to say, we need to raise taxes. She was there to say, you have money to properly fund law enforcement, and you're not doing it.
Gary, I want you to take off. Hold everybody. Gary, take off your former Republican Harris County Party chair hat and just give us the benefit of your decades of knowledge of criminal law, and also your contacts within the legal community, i.e., even the prosecutor side. Based upon this additional evidence, which it's additional to us, clearly prosecutors have known what Civis and the others do for a long time, and understanding that there was a decision made, even if they had the compulsion of a grand jury to return an indictment, they wouldn't do it before an election. They just made that decision. I believe that in covering this. Do you think there is enough there for an indictment?
Short answer, yes. I think she'll be indicted. What happened was after the initial indictments went down, there's a bunch of new information that the DA's office got, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, and it took them a while to get through it. And I think by the time they finished getting through it in the fall, we were too close to the election, because if they'd indicted her before the election, I think there would have been screaming that you've now intervened in the election. You've ensured that Lena Hidalgo will be defeated, because she was indicted and for no other reason. So I think that the play that the district attorney's office made here was probably the correct one. You don't want to get involved in the political decisions. That being said, Lena said during the summer she anticipated being indicted because she knows what went on. She knows what she did. And the uncovering, by the way, the uncovering by Bill King and the coverage you gave, Greg and Holly, was terrific. But here's what we don't see that we didn't talk about. Bill King made a request to the county attorney's office to get that information, and he was stonewalled. He made a freedom of information request. They said, we're going to send it to the attorney general. That's the way you do, and you two, to avoid having to cooperate. And then you all went to the auditor, and the auditor just gave it up without any question. So we have problems in the county attorney's office. There's no question about that. They're part of the corruption problem in the county. But she's going to get indicted. And she can tell her story. I mean, and she may tell the story that she was misled by her people and she was improperly used. And by the way, that all could be true, because when we go back and remember, Lena Hidalgo, when she got elected, had virtually no life experiences besides being a student. That's basically what she'd done in her life. That and volunteer for the Texas Civil Rights Project. So you understand why, if you get sophisticated operatives working with her, they can use her. And I think that may end up being part of her defense, that she was used and really didn't know what they were doing.
But I want to ask this question.
Go ahead.
What evidentiary basis must you have to prove participation in a conspiracy?
You need probable cause. So you have paperwork that shows she's involved, and my information tells me that one of the people indicted is cooperating. So you're going to have someone who's charged testifying against her to save their skin. And I understand, as a defense lawyer, I would attack them saying, you were bought and paid for basically by the government to cooperate because you were fearful you're going to jail. But that's what happens in conspiracies. That happens all the time. But no, that she's got. I said, in many ways I feel sorry for her, because I think she was taken advantage of. Rodney Ellis, I think, is the major problem in county government. And Rodney Ellis is a smart, sophisticated political operative. I have the utmost respect for his political abilities and how he manipulates the pieces on the chessboard, and how he uses people to get what he wants by staying in the shadows. You notice, Greg, you don't see Rodney Ellis up front or out on any of this, but his hand is behind the criminal justice problem we have, the scam going on with this getting the Democratic voter lists, in the plan to use COVID outreach to really canvass for Democratic voters. That's what was really going on. And that's where it all started. So Lena ends up getting used, and Adrian, to a lesser extent, not nearly as sophisticated as Rodney is. But what will be interesting, Greg, if the Republicans take control of the Commissioner's Court, if they get 4 votes, what's going to happen to Rodney Ellis? Then he's going to be exposed. I mean, the will to get rid of all this unnecessary spending, I believe, is there with the Republicans. They take control. That $460 million that you identified and I identified, Greg, is wasteful spending, bureaucrats doing the job for elected officials. I think it's all going to get flushed. I think it's all going away. And then they can spend it on police in the hospital district and paying guards at the jail more money, etc. We have plenty of money, Greg. We can afford to spend the money on what we need. We don't have enough money to spend on every cockamamie social program and political program that the leftist Democrats on Commissioner's Court have hatched. We don't.
Marcus, you had something to say?
I did, but I cringe when we talk about social programs like they have no value. And and particularly when you have a party that says that promotes pro-life, right? You have these babies, but then the programs that are try to put in place to help that family to get on track and to stay on track and to have great life, we want to cut those programs out.
And then it's not the function of county government, though, Marcus. I hear what you're saying.
And then it leads to, but this is where it leads to, right? This is where it leads to, because those families that depend on those programs to guide and gear their family, and those programs aren't available and those resources aren't available, then that child ends up in a community surrounded by a life of crime and begins to participate in crime. And then that money that we designate, that we took from the programs, now is used to support the jails and the police and the court that has to see this young man that they denied programs to in the first place.
Yeah,
that's the vicious cycle.
Yeah, but early childhood education programs that the county has created under these Democrats, it's already in existence with other agencies. So why is the county getting involved in duplicative functions? I mean, we have a situation, we have a probation department that I believe is underfunded and does a pretty good job with alternative programs, which Kim Ogg, to all her credit, has expanded significantly and to give first offenders an opportunity to get their act together. That's a good thing. And they have programs to do it. So why is it that the public defender's office basically is setting up a duplicative version of the probation department to provide services to their client? I don't get it. Give the money to the probation department. We don't need multiple examples of county government duplicating their functions. So that's unnecessary. It really is. And so they're going to dig deep. They're going to get into
I'm not in disagreement that we should look for where duplicate programs are a problem. The question is whether or not the programs are effective. And
that's a good point.
And if we're talking about programs and we're celebrating programs that deal with probation, then we have to understand that that's a problem too. Because while those programs for probation are necessary, there's the opportunity to prevent the probation is where the goal should be. That should be the target.
Yeah, I would tell you, Marcus, I was going to say, there is plenty of money in the county budget to fund everything we really need to do that is being successful. So your point, you got a successful program that's working. You need to fund it. You need to give it more money so it can expand its reach and help more people. I agree with you. But as long as we have people that want to grow government, just to grow government, 460 million that was identified is probably over $1 billion because all the other fraud, waste, and abuse that's been going on. That's plenty of money to fund all kinds of things. But you're right. It's actually two parts we have to deal with. Number one, we need to deal with the immediate crime problem that people are in the criminal justice system. But then we also have to take a look at successful programs for young people to make sure that we divert them from going into the life of crime. That's what you're talking about. And you're right. If they got successful programs, we need to fund them.
I want to make a note here, and Holly, I think, will confirm this. One of the other subcontractors on the Elevate Strategy contract was the Texas Organizing Project, which, and we were talking about reaching into communities who were hesitant, perhaps, to take the vaccine. There was never anything listed in terms of outreach to perhaps communities that are with less orientation to the Democratic Party. This, and Tony, we haven't heard from you on this topic as we opine. What's going through your mind?
Well, if the Texas Organizing Project is named, they're a group that does profound outreach. So if someone really wants to reach the community, that's a group to go with. I'd love to defend them in court and say that they've got a right to engage in civic engagement and everything they do is by the letter. So if that's the proof, there's no proof. The other thing.
Well, Tony, wait a second.
I would agree with you, Tony. The question is, did they find an equal? Did they find a match? Right. If you went to I know what TOPS does. Right. They're a grassroots Democrat, vote getter. Right. If you spent the money saying we know they get to the community, that's great. Did you do it on the other side? Who is the red version of TOPS? And if you gave both of those organizations a piece of the pie, saying they know how to get into the homes and into the hearts of the people who need this service, then that would be fair.
And
No,
let's note that, while they're getting taxpayer money from Harris County government, they also gave in-kind donations to Lena Hidalgo totaling, I think it was $70,000 or more, where they're doing canvassing for her and providing staff to her and so forth. So
but
it just really looks bad. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's the
You know, it is
let me
bad. It
just
is
it is bad.
bad.
Yeah.
let me just clarify though. I am not the lawyer for Lena Hidalgo, but if I was, if I
You have
was,
a lot of work.
here's what the billable hour I would earn would say the following: one, if I'm going to target the Latino demographic, there are no equivalents on the red side. I promise you, I've looked for them, and
No,
if
that's not
they're
true. We have
I,
Hispanic
again,
organizations. We do.
if I can continue, Gary, I mean, I've done that work. I've looked for those entities. Libra Initiative is hack and they're nothing. I would instead argue that you're just trying to spend money mindlessly. And I will also say one thing about TOP. They do their paperwork. So it would be wrong for them to not engage in civil engagement the way their paperwork makes them do it. And also to do any sort of donations that go beyond. I mean, you still have their own personal rights to vote who they want to as individuals.
Yeah, but not using government money, Tony. That's
And
the
they're
problem.
not.
And by the way,
They're not.
by the way,
Otherwise, they would lose some of their also benefits as well.
Yeah,
But
but
let me
you know,
just
by
add
the
one
way,
thing. Let me
Hundreds
just
tons of money from the county, and then they're campaigning for Lena Hidalgo. How do
yeah,
you
that
say
makes
that?
sense.
let me just add one thing though, because of course that's all in the weeds. Here's the bigger picture: is that one, she's not going to get indicted, and then two, let's talk about just sheer power, because you're getting into the facts. No one's going to care about the facts. The sheer power. No one cares about the facts. This is a fight for sheer power. This is a fight for sheer power. So, with the election coming up, simply the doubt hanging over Lena Hidalgo's head is the weapon. That's the entire weapon.
Tony,
It's to
there's
try
good
to hurt her. Hold on,
reason.
Gary, if I may finish.
Yeah,
Gary,
go
if
ahead.
I may finish.
Go
The
ahead.
whole point is to make her lose votes. Additionally, let's talk sheer power. Ken Paxton, and I'm not saying this as glibly as I like to say, he has shown us that if you have enough power, an indictment doesn't matter at the end of the day. So really, even if even if you get indicted, if you've got enough power, it doesn't matter. And let's go back to Greg's original point. What the mistake was, the 3 county commissioners were acting on sheer power when they were pushing this proposal that could be called the tax hike. They were pushing it at sheer power level because they had the votes. If they had spent more time, like you said, digging deeper into the folks and convincing them that this matters, there'd be a bigger outpouring of support. And instead, it's just on the playing field of sheer power. So I mean, I think that's really all this evidence after the election. I think you're going to be shocked to find that there's not as much importance given on this issue afterwards.
I
I'll also
disagree.
I'll project that I think there's a better than even chance that the Biden Justice Department indicts Ken Paxton after the election on the fraud and bribery charges that
I think that could happen, and if so, then he needs to go too. But Lena, here, Texas Organizing Project, the major politician who funds her is, guess who? Rodney Ellis. This is a tool for Rodney Ellis and his political machine. That's what's going on. And the fact that government money is given to them and then they're giving in-kind donations to politicians like Lena Hidalgo, and you don't think there's something wrong there? I guarantee you, if this was the Republicans doing that, it'd be on the front page above the fold of the Chronicle. As it is, we don't read about it at all.
Here's a term that Lena likes to use. It's beyond the pale. It's beyond the pale to think that top canvassers would go out and only talk about COVID vaccines and not say, hey, who are you voting for? Hey,
that was never the
are you registered? Hey, because that's not in their DNA. Because ultimately they do that for free. They go out and do that.
And think about
they're
this,
getting
Greg.
paid to go out.
Think about this: $11 million contract, and we heard what Marcus said about there's some good programs that are preventive for keeping our young people from getting into the criminal justice system. Think they could have used another $11 million? Yeah, they could have, but instead, Lena, Adrian, and Rodney decide they're going to give money to a political person to do so-called COVID canvas, which was always garbage. It was Democratic outreach, and it was being paid for by the taxpayers. And that's the bottom line. That is a huge scandal. And, you know, and Tony, I got bad news for you. If the voting trends continue, the voters have already taken in and understand we have a runaway crime problem, and the problem starts with the Democratic commissioners. They understand that. They understand we have a corruption problem, and it starts with the Democratic commissioners. And let me finish. And they understand there's a runaway spending problem, and it starts with the Democratic commissioners. That will, God willing, result in Rodney. You know, Rodney stays. Unfortunately, he's not on the up for ballot, but Lena and Adrian Garcia both getting defeated in a week and a half.
Gary, if you really want to talk about sheer power, let's be real. Lena is going to win because she has a structural advantage, and that same structural advantage is an advantage to Abbott, Patrick, and Paxton. So the status quo is that all four of those win. Now, are there going to be some shakeups? We're going to see. We just said that the status quo will prevail. At the end of the day, the status quo, the structure for both parties, is that the ones in power stay in power. At the end of the day.
He didn't do it on purpose, but I think Tony just predicted the defeat of Beto O'Rourke. I think he just did.
I said structurally.
Watching. Hey, Marcus, I'm going to switch gears real quick. Is there anything else you want to talk about? If not, I'm going to ask you a question.
No.
Okay. Christian, Javier, or McCullers, who would you pitch in the critical game 3? Because Javier's been untouchable lately.
Man, I probably would go with Javier so we could have McCullers
in game 4.
In game 4, yeah.
You know, interesting. Urquidy hasn't pitched any, and he's got the most World Series wins of anybody on our staff. And here's a tougher question. You know, if it's really a team game, do we bypass JV if it goes 6 or 7, or do we put JV back out on the mound?
I think we. I don't know if we bypass him. I think we, you know, and I can't second guess Dusty. He's phenomenal, right? Yeah. But and this is why I run hospitality business, but I would have pulled Verlander after the 3rd inning. And I'm sure Dusty would appreciate this. That's what my gut was telling me. He appreciates gut talk. That was what my gut told me sitting in that stadium, even before it happened. But which is why
he wasn't on.
Which is why I'm a superstitious baseball guy. I left out of the stadium when we got to 5-0. Why? Because I was there the night before when we had 5-0, and I stayed and we lost. We got to 5-0, and I left out of the stadium.
Thank you, Marcus.
I got to get out of here. Let me just go outside. Let me walk around.
Hey, you know,
and if we had legalized marijuana, I could have walked around and you know, right? But we don't have legalized marijuana, so you know.
In my fantasies, I'm a business consultant, and I like this idea. I had it spontaneously. I see Tillman Fertitta and Marcus Davis talking, and all of a sudden, boom, a featured restaurant at the Golden Nugget Galveston is the Breakfast Club.
Oh.
It would be,
that'd be nice.
Bonkers successful.
Well, I will say this on gambling. One of the problems with what the governor's talking about is it would only reward the major league casino companies and would cut out regular people. So
I was
the
wondering.
idea
I don't know, does Fertitta in that category?
Yeah, Fertitta's in that category. But the idea that they would have to reach out to a diverse set of Texans to getting them involved in what they're doing makes sense. So yeah, Marcus's Breakfast Club at a casino in Houston or Galveston, a major casino, makes perfect sense.
The Breakfast Club.
Given what they're going to have to do.
I believe they have to amend the Texas Constitution to allow this, right? So you're going to have to get 2/3 of each chamber of the legislature and then put it to a vote.
Yeah, that's
right.
just taking care of the
my
fat
question
cats.
to
Ain't
you
going
is,
to happen.
And what they're talking about is, these resort style casinos, nice casinos. Well, how do you justify saying only the big guys, only Fertitta?
Right. I agree. I agree.
How is that fair? Not to say that a lot of our other licensing and
Well, and part of it will
fair, but
be,
that's
well,
really
we'll
unfair.
bring in, yeah, the part
Yeah,
of it will be like
I
they
think
do with the airport, minority partners. We need to have minority partners involved in this. We need to have a diverse set of Texans with the
yeah.
opportunity, Marcus, Tony,
If there's
etc.
a reasonable explanation as to why, right? So, for example, what you mentioned, the contracts, right? These big contracts for concessions, they're given to big companies because of capacity, right? Because they need someone that has the capacity and the history of doing it, which kind of goes both ways. Because if you never get the contract, then you'll never develop capacity. But I get it. So if and only if that's the reason, then yes, it should be coupled with mandates that allow not allow that force that allow the opportunities and force the big company to to give opportunities. Yes, if as an entrepreneur, if I want to get into the casino business, I should have the opportunity to do so, and I shouldn't be Heisman from doing it.
Well, I think that it would pass. And if we think that the lobby for the oil and gas industry is big in Austin, if they get the scent that the big prize, the Lone Star State, is up for grabs, the lobby is going to be making some big dollars this session. And Holly, if it goes to a statewide vote, I think it passes. 60.
Yes.
Because the data is there. The majority of Texans agree with legalizing marijuana. The majority of Texans agree with legalizing gambling. And I think it should stop there, right? If that's what Texans want, if that's what citizens want, then I think the elected officials' responsibility is to put things in place to prevent and curtail some of the harms that both Holly and who else was who we missed?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I think
talked about it too.
I think that's the responsibility of the elected official is to guard against those things. But I don't think the elected officials should be in the business of deciding for the people what the people want. And they've made it clear through poll after poll, they want legalized marijuana, they want legalized gambling.
Yeah, I tell you right now, you go to convenience stores in Houston, and there's one-liners. I see people who look like they don't have two nickels to rub together buying, $200 worth of scratch-offs. I mean, people are going to gamble.
Yeah.
It's
not to mention those little machines. You ever seen people sitting at those little machines? Yeah. I don't know how they work. I don't know how they make money, but I've seen people sit there. Yeah. I was like, wow. And I guess that may go against the point that I'm making because they're going to be sitting at the slot machine, but we can't have rules that prevent certain things just because it may have some harm attached to it. There would be nothing in existence if that were the case because nearly everything has.
There's a medium there, right? So there's, on the one hand, you're going to outlaw heroin, right? But then milder things, there is a medium. You can't have a free for all, right? If you have a free for all, then your society decays pretty quickly, and I think history has shown that. But you can't go full anarchy on these things, full libertarian, if you will. You do have to have some standards, but where you draw those lines, I think, is where the debate is, right?
Holly, we've shown we're not judicious in where we draw those lines. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but it is clear how dangerous alcohol is, and it is legal. Right. And then you make the comparison to marijuana.
Alcoholism destroy families.
Opium wars of China.
It is clear what prescription drugs do to individuals and to families. It is very clear what cigarettes do to the human body and to health, so on and so forth. And yet, we decide, you can smoke your tobacco and you can drink your liquor, but that marijuana, you can't do that. And that blackjack, you can't play that.
All right, folks. Hey, everybody wave goodbye to Gary. I want to tell anybody who's watching that a heavily armed guy named Chuck will be keeping an eye on Gary's house. So don't.
Yes, he's retired FBI, so he's tough. But
Nice.
I didn't want to. I was thinking about that, Gary. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Thank you.
You know what we didn't get into? We didn't talk about the attack on Pelosi's husband.
Oh yeah, that's
that was horrific.
Horrific. And points out the crime problem we have.
Yes, the crime problem.
And where's the protection? I mean, she's
mental illness, and most importantly, the rhetoric in our nation. I will say, mental illness is an enormous problem, and we have a lot of work in this state to deal with it because it is really out there big time. So that's it. My parting comment, Greg, since I will not be here on election day, so you can tape me if you want to get my take. I was going to tell you.
You mean a shot of you crying because Lena won?
No, I'm not worried about that. What I am telling our viewers is they need to make sure they go vote. I mean, the right to vote is just so important and critical for our democracy. And when you don't vote, you're letting other people make decisions for you, your children, and the future of this county, the state, and the nation. So please vote.
So there was unanimity today on the Astros and our desire for our fellow citizens to exercise their right, their responsibility in my mind. Anyway,
it doesn't take that long. It's a long ballot. You know, if you know what you're doing, it takes like 10 minutes. That's all it takes.
Okay. Hey, everybody, go Astros. Have a great week.
Go Astros.
Bye.